Aloha, and welcome to another Candid Conversation. Today, we're joined again by Floyd Jerkins, and the subject we're going to deal with today is training. Greetings, Mr. Jerkins. How are you today?
I'm very good, Ron, and yourself?
So far, so good, although looking at my face, it looks like I need some work on my eyes. It's early in the morning here. Training, something near and dear to both of our hearts. I started teaching at university. When I was in university, I taught coaching and training in phys ed. So I taught people how to teach. And then as time evolved at the dealerships, you're always involved in teaching people different methods, tools, systems, processes, procedures. Then I get into consulting and it becomes a much more group oriented, almost back to the front of the class type of stuff. And then in the early 90s, when we got serious about getting in the training business and created Quest Learning Centers, front of the room training, 2-day sessions, etc., were de rigueur in those days. And so teaching and training has always been part of what I do. The challenge for me in teaching and training is the learning of the students, how to get them excited about learning, how to get them understanding that they need to continually hone their skills, improve their skills in order to keep up with things. What's your background in thinking on training and how it's evolved and some of the challenges, so that you and I can start addressing things for people that maybe they can take to heart?
I think a big turning point for me was attending Dale Carnegie classes. I attended as a student, and I'd been through school. I'm at the dealership. As you were saying, I'm training people every day, but I didn't understand what I was doing. I was just helping. And I remember attending the Dale Carnegie class, and that was really an eye opener. And then I became a graduate assistant and actually taught the classes, and that really was an eye opener because it brought in the human relations side, into the training methods versus just training on a systems or a process. Because sometimes at the dealership, I knew the process that needed to be done, but this person just can't do it, won't do it. Or I have to keep checking on it every other day, and it's not being implemented all the way through. Just literally drove me crazy. So, as I learned more about the interaction of the human side, and then started to really study in depth, how do adults learn? It's kind of funny, Ron, we just talking about grandchildren, and my, granddaughter, she's in college now. And like she says, I think you're absolutely right, Paps. They just don't really care if I'm here or not. And I said, no, babe, because in grade school, you have to be there. When you get to high school, there's a probation officer, and they're going to inspect to make sure once you're in college, it's up to you. It's up to you to get yourself up in the morning, go to the class. You have to become a self-learner. And one of the challenges that I think in a lot of organizations today, Ron, are still back to what is that commitment to professional development, at the dealership level, certainly at an owner's level. We talked about that, the evolution of a business owner. I mean, how serious are they about evolving the competencies of all their people, or all the people that primarily need it? And then how do you measure it? How do you look at it? Why does somebody even need training? Training sometimes isn't always the answer, and that's an assessment all by itself that, training doesn't fix some behavioral problems. It doesn't fix all those issues, but, I wrote an article some years ago called "Teach Me, I Dare You." And in it, I came out of a session, and it was a brand new class, 28 people. And I bet I had 4 or 5 that were ready to be there, but we had about a dozen that were, whatever, and they were there because their dealer made them come. And I went back and got on this rampage, said, listen, we're not going to enroll anybody else unless they want to be there. And we started coaching the management and the HR and the owner, saying, listen, if you're thinking you want to fire this guy and you want to put him in a class, don't do that. I mean, you probably should have fired him a year ago, if you didn't already. So I think it's trying to, when you look at adult learning and see how many people are really eager to learn, those people are fun, easy to work with. It's the ones that are skeptical, or the ones that doubt themselves, or maybe they have a low self-image, low self-esteem. That in itself can breed problems. And it's amazing how when they do acquire that knowledge and they feel like they've got how it builds them, the whole self-esteem rises, the self-image changes, and they become hungry, they become eager, to learn.
Yeah, it's interesting. You touched on, I think, a series of important things. Somebody's been in the job 20, 30 years and they are asked by their company to take a class. I know that stuff. What the hell are you talking about? I don't need that stuff. And we see that a lot in our internet-based training. Somebody takes a class, they're told to take a class, and we have a series of things you have to go through, and there's, they can skip right through to the final assessment, and many of them do. And our pass point is 80%. So out of 20 questions, they have to get 16 right. And people that go right to the final test right away, not one of them, and there's been hundreds, have hit the 80%. Oh, darn. So back they go. And then we have a saying around the family, we skim and scan things. I know what this is saying. And
Right.
So they come through the class and they skim and scan things, and damn, I didn't get 80%. Well, we lock them out after 2 tests. They have to contact us to get back in. They have to contact their boss. What do I do, boss? So the boss knows, and we know, and invariably the third time they get 80% because now they're serious. And guess what? It never happens again, ever.
Right.
But the second point you made, I think, is even more important. The companies are not investing in their human capital. They're investing in every other aspect of the business, but not the human capital. And I'm trying to get people to put that on their balance sheet.
Well, I agree, because it's really, most time it's technicians training. We know we have to have certain competencies there to work on our machinery, and especially as machinery advances. But if we have a 400 employees and we realize that we have a mid-management level issue where they don't know how to delegate, what do? We have 38 managers, but only 12 of them do a good job, but the rest don't. Well, why? Do we send them all to training? Do we send everybody to the same training? That's where your on-demand training, Ron, I think is so important today, is because it allows that dealer owner to really pre-select and really identify the right training for the right message, instead of just sending everybody to everything, because that never worked before. It certainly doesn't work today.
It's a function. I think it's a function of the evolution of education. The front of class training, we had 2-day, 3-day sessions. Universities have 2 months, 3-month semesters.
Right.
And you don't really know to the end. My grandson's taking calculus, and the teacher is hated by almost everybody. My granddaughter, same thing, and he kills them all through the year, and everybody passes because of the final exam is his opinion of how well they applied themselves for the year. Well, you don't get that encouragement for 3 or 4 months. Right. So Declan's saying to me, well, I think I'll focus on astronomy, not astrophysics, because there's less math in astrophysics. I said, well, get out of this class and then make that decision. But employees have the same darn problem. In many cases, they keep their head down. I want people to know one of the drivers of employee satisfaction is knowing how to do their job. And with this great resignation being 3 to 3.5% of the workforce every month, 14% of 160 million people, you're looking at 18 to 20 million people that change jobs of their own volition. Right. And I wonder how many of those folks felt comfortable about the job they were doing. I know a lot of people that don't really know how to do their job because nobody spent the time.
Yep, that's right. They were thrown into the position. And when they get thrown in, they're expected to figure it out. That's what we pay you for, is to figure it out. But if they come from your industry, if they come from a similar style operation, there's some similarities. But, Ron, I looked at literally hundreds and hundreds of financial statements over the years. And you could always see there was a certain operation, and maybe there were 15 of them all doing about the same volume. But man, how they got to the bottom line, was always, there are always uniqueness and things that do differently. So that means how the systems, the processes work, how the people interact, all that makes a huge difference. So there has to be some type of internal focus to provide that training and that development. Because, my beginning question, like, who decides who needs trained? Who decides that? For the fast learner, the person that comes say, hey, I need to learn this, where do I go to find it? That's easy. But for the guy that's hiding, maybe a little uncomfortable to share they don't know, but they just kind of go through the motions. Those are harder.
Yeah, much harder. We had, as you indicated, we've got structured training based on individual skills and gaps in those skills. In the front of a classroom, I used to take 2 days and I'd block them into 4-hour slots, and in the 4-hour slots I'd have 2 subjects. So in the 2 days I had 16 subjects to cover, blah blah blah, here we go. And actually it's 8 subjects in a class. We did it for 3 years, so that's 24 subjects. Cool. Well, what we've done now is say, okay, basic marketing, but you don't know how to set up a market. You know what your customer potential is, but you don't know how to allocate your time. So, we can get much more personalized. Owners today, and this is a nasty comment, view the employees as a tool in a toolbox. I got this job, I go extract that tool, I put it in place, everything's cool. I go to the toolbox, there's nothing there that is going to satisfy the need. I go buy a new tool and I replace the one that's in the box. That's the end of it. And HR today, I think, is starting to play a much more important role in the whole thing of employee development. Trying to find, working with high school counselors, attracting people, giving them tours and different things, interviewing people. Most people don't know how to interview. Onboarding employees, the initial training of employees, the fundamental job description, what's important, what's the standards of performance, going over all of those things, and then a performance review. And the performance review from our perspective is an assessment. Based on your job, here's 90 questions, answer those questions, and I will know with a very high degree of precision how well you know your job.
Well, I think that's the real key, Ron, is that, if your kid goes to school and they come home and they're in the 8th grade and they attend the first semester and they come home and they say, listen, I've attended first semester, I've got this, don't worry about me, I don't need to go back to school. At that age and what's going on, get your butt back to school. When we become adults, we get better at convincing another adult that we know what we know. But when you're tested, when it's put to paper, and whether it's multiple choice, true, false, there's still easy ways to identify, do they really know what they know?
Yeah.
I used to have a lot of kickback on some of the pre-testing that we did, because I'd get phone calls from parts managers saying, listen, Floyd, one of your questions, it's a trick question. I said, well, there's really no trick questions on there. Was there a difference in markup and margin? And they kept saying, well, no, there's not. Well, yeah, there is. And then the other question, does your dealer ever tell you that your parts margins are off? Yes, he does. Okay, well, if you don't know how to figure the difference, then that's probably a telling sign. So I think that the testing of the pre allows you to put that benchmark in place.
Yeah, I
post test, it allows you to validate, did the learning take place? And the nice thing about the on-demand is they can rewind and go back through it again. Much different than live classroom training, so they can go back and rehear it again and go, do I really understand it?
Yeah, we have, it's that comment that I know this stuff. I've been doing this thing forever. Or that's a trick question. I still get that from people. I got one the other day, an individual who's been involved in the business for 35 years. That's a trick question. Which one? Well, you got several in there. Now they don't want to get specific because they know I'm coming, right? But it's really interesting. And I talked a little bit. I was just rereading a book called Make It Stick, which is predicated on the fact that learning and retention is enhanced, improved dramatically if the learning experience is shortened.
Yeah.
If you have a quiz after 5, 10, 15 minutes, as opposed to after 50 minutes, so think back to the typical university class. It's 50 minutes in duration, somebody at the front of a room with 300 people. Now, in the old days, technology didn't allow us to do this, but after 10 minutes, I can throw a quiz up and they've all got their laptops there, answer this question, and I'll wait and see it. And we'll push it up on the screen behind me as to how many people are still outstanding and what the score is.
That's right.
You do that the first time and it catches them off guard because they don't know what that, The second time still catches a few. The third time, and from that point forward, bingo, they're paying attention because they know you're going to catch them.
Yep.
50 minutes, it take, well, I can check in and out. It doesn't matter. 10 minutes,
Right.
So we're redoing all of our classes that way, all of them.
Yeah. One of the unique things I think that happens as an adult, we begin to get all these compounded experiences in our brains, and they layer. They just continue to layer. And here my education was way down here, but now I'm up here. So how do I go back into that mindset of opening my mind, opening my ability to learn again? I mean, that's a tough challenge, because even as adults today, some learn something very quickly, some are slower to learn, and some, it's not that they're dumb or illiterate, they're just a slower learner. Well, if you got a class of accelerants, where everybody's a fast learner and you got a couple slow ones, if they don't have a good enough self-image, they'll struggle speaking up, speaking out. So that's where the on-demand ability, allows that ability to be able to have someone learn at their own pace. And I think that particular is one of the real opportunities, I think, of the online learning segments today. Something we tried to look at years ago and push hard, but everybody was in this, I don't have time, we can't do it. We never had money become the issue. It was always time, and then everybody wants that, they want that silver bullet, Ron. Tell me the one thing that well, there's a dozen BBs, but there's not one silver bullet. As an adult, we learn today, and it's best that if we go back and apply what we've learned so it becomes behavior. I don't want to just think it, I want to be able to do it. So once we're able to apply the knowledge and turn it into behavior, then we can come back and learn some more. Yeah. And that's called spaced accountability, spaced recognition. It's the ability to learn, have some space in between there of time, come back and learn again, and you'll build on those competencies over a period of time. But if you don't keep using it, these layers of memories begin to grow again, and they end up dissipating. You can recall that. It's kind of like riding a bike. You may not have ridden a bike for 30 years, but your muscle mass says, hey, I think I can do this. Now, the first couple of times you get on it, I mean, you're pretty rocky.
Yeah.
But then you start to pick it up and you figure it out, and your brain starts to click in again when you really know it. But you can't just have a sound bite and think that that's learning. That's just not, that's not really it.
Your reference to riding a bike, muscle memory in athletics is a very real thing. And coaches in athletics, it gets very personal. I was a swimmer, as you know, and where I put my hand in the water was a critical element.
Yeah. And
I had a guy walk beside me. He was walking on the pool side as I was swimming in the first lane. I swam backstroke, and he was a pain in the badoobie. My hand had to go in at a specific place every time. So when I go swimming now, my hand goes in at that same spot because 8 hours a day for 8 years or 5 hours a day for 8 years, I was in the pool. Whoa. And unless you're exercising your brain the same way, it starts atrophying.
That's right.
You sat in a bed for 6 months, you'd have a hard time walking when you got up.
That's
Your
right.
muscles are gone. If you park your brain and you don't, you sit down, this is maybe bad image, but if you sit down in front of television, you go home, you eat your meal, you chat with the family, you sit down on the television, have a beer or two, go to bed at 11 o'clock. If you do that every night, what in the heck's going on here?
That's right.
And training, let me just, we just received something from IASED. As you know, we're accredited, and this is one of the blurbs of all of the people that have received U.S. government certification accreditation on American Red Cross, American Society of Civil Engineers, and on and on and on and on. There's nobody other than us in the construction equipment space. Just gives you an idea of how important people view this market. There's not a lot of people here, a lot of money, but it's not going to attract a whole bunch of, it's not going to attract a sales force in training. So it's left to guys like you and I to, do these things because we're passionate about helping other people, which is kind of interesting.
Right. One of the things that I think impacts this at the dealership level is, it's the culture. I always labeled it as 4 stages of culture. There's a stagnant culture, which is, we're still in business. We can still be profitable, but we're not really making changes or evolving. We're just letting the customers come through the door. The doors are swinging, the phone's ringing, everything's clicking. We've got to be doing well. And then there's a growing stage, which generally requires management to begin to decide, well, we've got to start addressing things this way. And then there's the learning stage, and then there's a teaching stage. When we can get a business to a learning and a teaching stage, Ron, they become evolutionary. They're able to withstand market changes, price point changes, because they're very agile, in the organization. But if they're, growing, if they're stagnant and trying to jumpstart that, man, there's a big gap of operational performance when you go from stagnant to teaching. And sometimes you'll have departments go through various stages. Sometimes you'll have branch stores go through various stages and for various reasons. But the art of growing the enterprise is, organizational development is the key, because it starts with personal development. And when you look at line items on budgets, if you don't see that above the fold, then it's just an expense. It's something they look at it's an expense to control, not an investment to be made. And I think the operations that are truly looking at training and development as an investment, and they're measuring it differently than just the old expense line item, I think those operations are setting themselves apart.
Yeah.
By far. That's where a lot of times, when this whole cycle of learning, my particular services today, it used to be we fit a very wide niche, of where we could fit to help an operation. Today, I'm a very narrow niche in terms of that cycle of learning. And a lot of times, in online classes, they're not involved with a lot of others. So there's not that peer pressure, the other dynamic that comes from classroom settings. And for business owners that are setting in 20 groups that maybe don't want to speak up, speak out, or they have more information, that's where I'm fitting a niche, fitting that hole today. So this whole concept of the culture of the business, the ability to define where their educational value comes from, somebody has to decide that. Somebody has to set that pace, in the operation. And Ron, what's unique today, and there's just, you don't really have any competition. You're so far out ahead of them, with what you're doing here.
You're right there. There isn't competition relative to content. The competition is getting people to understand there's a need.
Right.
And so about 20, 30 years ago, the Associated Equipment Distributors, they have 2 pieces. One's an AED foundation that looks after education, and then the general. And the foundation wanted to have a standard period of time for training for every employee in an equipment dealership. And they arrived at 40 hours. And I said, okay, that's cool. Where'd you get that from? They said, well, that's a week worth of training for a technician. I said, okay. So they go off to a manufacturer's school for a week. Is that all that's required? There's 4 sections of a machine: engine, powertrain, hydraulic, electrical. Are you going to have a week on everything, on each? What about the different models? How'd you come up with the 40? So my deal came back and said, well, look, I want a number of hours or days of training based on the knowledge of the men and the women. Oh, well, we don't have a generic test that will evaluate the technical skills of a technician. Imagine that. Imagine that. So I built one with others. So we've got a rental industry technician assessment and a construction assessment. We don't do any training in that. We give that to the dealership and say, okay, fine, here's your inventory of skills by store. What are you going to do about the gaps? So that's A. And then I come back now and say, well, what do you do with the rest of the people? Is somebody in training in payables getting any training? And then you go back to culture, and the person's card in accounts receivable is collections officer. So I call you up because you're overdue, and this is Ron Slee. I'm the collections officer. You and I need to talk. I mean, this is so here comes culture, and it's all wrapped together, Floyd.
Yeah.
You know, it's remarkable. And so
there's got to be done in pieces, Ron. It's got to be done in pieces at the dealership.
No question.
Mean, the concept to me is, if we could just stop the business and say, all right, for 90 days, we're going to shut off customers. We're just going to become contained with just my people. And we could train and educate and get everybody walking and talking on the same page and open the door again and business start. Well, that's a great fallacy. It just, it doesn't work that way. So we have to train while we're still running business. We have to train while we're still conducting service to customers and, all the selling, all the stuff we have to do. But it's critical that it's done, and it's done well. The old idea of we're too busy, it became an excuse, because it's when you're the busiest is when you need to be at your best.
Well, the other side of that is there's an old truth that's always been there in my mind. If you want to get something done, ask a busy person, because they know how to manage their time. Anybody who says to me, I'm too busy, it's an indicator that they don't know how to manage time. So we go right into that class on managing time.
Yeah.
We enable bad behaviors so often because we allow so many people to check their brains at the door and operate all day long by coming to you and saying, Floyd, what do I do with this? Or how do I do that? And you give them answers because it's easier, faster, and get them out of there.
Yeah. I used to teach in a segment of this called the delegation strategies, and always 3 questions. You never answer the question when someone asks you, what's the problem? If they can't describe the problem, you send them back. If they can come up and describe the problem, all right, then what are some potential solutions that are good for you, good for the company, good for the department? It can't be just good for the department, because it might not be good for the customer. So you ask them these series of questions, and it's amazing how you can turn people around and getting them to think for themselves and starting to make decisions on the front line versus having to ask permission to make decisions. Because I think most of the time, Ron, it's any assessment I ever did on an operation, I don't care what it was, I started in the back and worked my way up to the front.
Yep.
And then owner said, well, I'll meet you in the morning. I said, no, sir, I won't be around to you till probably maybe close to 11. Maybe we'll go to lunch. Or I'm coming in through the shop. I'm going to talk to the guys in the back first and if somebody's busy, I'll leave them alone. I'll make my rounds from there. But it's amazing how you can sit with an owner in a management group and they say, man, how did you learn that? Well, your people will tell you, but they sometimes won't tell their management because there's either fear or there's some obstacle there. It could be real or not. But your people have the answers to how to improve the operations. I mean, I really think there's power in that, that the front line generally knows what to do. They just have to have the right support mechanisms to do it.
The right leadership. The leaders have somehow squelched that. I've got the same sequence. They used to come and say, I got a problem. Okay, what is it? And they have a hard time struggling telling me what the problem is, defining it, describing it. So we, go back, and when you're ready, come forward. They come in, they describe it. I said, okay, give me a couple of solutions. Oh, well, go back. So now they know, come with the definition, come with a couple of solutions. So they come with the definition. Yeah, here's a couple of solutions. Yeah. Third question is, which one do you think is the right one?
Which is the best one and why? Why do you feel that way? That's right.
Okay, go do it. What?
Yeah.
After a while, that creates employees that are prepared to do it without even coming to your door. If it's sensitive, they'll come. If they're not sure, they'll come. And that's a coaching experience, right?
Right.
I think leadership is the one that's curtailed that freedom of expression, that freedom of speech, whatever the heck you want to call it. And that's a bad thing.
Yeah,
The people that are doing the job know it better than anybody else. And if we don't pay attention to them, you coming in the back, they'll tell consultants, they won't tell their boss.
That's right. That's right. And I think there's just so much, especially in our world today, Ron, they're running helter skelter. They're busy. They're making money. I mean, it's profitable. It's just, the problem is sometimes that profitability hides the sins.
Big time.
And sometimes there's frustration in the organization at a high level. And we're making money, our bottom line's strong, but yet we're burning our people out.
Yep.
And see, that always bothered me because, I was looking, every client, it was like, where they're going to be at in 40 years from today. And some would say, well, listen, I'm only 35. Well, no, let's plan out, where's your organization going to be in 15, 20, 25 years? And if you can't see that far out, we need to start thinking that way, because that's how you evolve your systems towards a long run. You don't just solve problems today, you're trying to solve it for the future and make that business, it was kind of unique, Ron, there's two local restaurants here, both of them high-end, white tablecloth. $45 steaks. It's the high-end stuff. When you go in one, they're struggling finding people. And you go in there, you can just, for me, I can feel that tension, in the air. I can feel that. You go to the other restaurant and people are bobbing around, laughing, staff's moving and shaking. And when you ask them, are you guys having problems getting people? Well, no, not really. We don't have that problem. We have a few people waiting to come on board with us. Now, the difference is two things. One is that the second business pays an extremely high wage. But out of that extreme high wage, he expects high performance, and he's able to get it. The first operation, the restaurant, it's a beautiful setting, it's great, but there's always negative tension in there, and nobody's having any fun. They're short-staffed, they're running ragged. They put the smile on, but as soon as they turn away, you can tell their face drops. And, that to me is, while we're really busy, we got to remember to stop, pause, have a little fun, make sure that our people are doing good with that too.
There's a thing that I'm pushing this year, and we'll stay at it all year, maybe longer, called the customer experience. And it's just what you were describing. There's a direct correlation. Harvard's done studies in all manner of people. There's a direct correlation between employee satisfaction and loyalty on the one hand, and customer satisfaction and loyalty on the other. They're directly related. So
That's right.
The customer experience in the restaurant, maybe they overpay. Doesn't matter. You're talking at a Sunday afternoon discussion and in a party. You're at church after church, and you're chatting with people. Geez, have you been to ABC? Wow, that's a really great experience. Yeah, but DEF's got better food. Yeah, but that's a real pain to be at. It's life is very simple. It really is. People can figure it out.
When you talk to that owner, he's just a neat guy. He walks around, he's very unassuming. And of course, my wife said, just leave him alone. And I said, oh, come on. So every time I go in this, oh, there's the retired consultant, and he'll come over and chat with me. And, I asked him one time, I said, so you're net to the bottom line. How much different is it compared to others in your industry? And he said, oh, I'm the highest. Yeah. But he said, I reserve that because, I don't want to be here every day. He said, sometimes the worst problems happen is when I get in the middle of things. He said, I just get out of their way.
Isn't that the truth? Yeah.
He said, we've got this mandate. We have once a month meetings. And he said, if I see something going haywire in the operation, I just wait until my monthly meeting, and then once I tell these people that they're able to get it done, they fix it. He said, I don't have to beat them up. He said, I've been through that before where we had to do that, but I decided that I want to pay more money and not let money become an obstacle to, we made good money as an owner, but I'm willing to share more of that so I have a life. And that, that's just music to my ears, Ron.
That's exactly, it's a customer experience. I remember for years and years, I'm traveling around the world in the Caterpillar family, and I get on an airport, get out of an airport in Paris, as an example, go to the curb, get in a taxi, say, take me to the cat dealer. And off they go. They know where it is. I go into Amsterdam, take me to the cat dealer, same thing. Take me to the Komatsu dealer. Where are they? Interesting. So it's the whole thing. It's the internal culture. It's the attitude of the employees. It's the knowledge and skills of the employees that gives that attitude some oomph. And then it's the brand.
Right.
I want to be there as an employee. I want to be there as a customer. I want to be there.
Right.
That's because of the mood, the tone, the culture, whatever the heck you want it. But it's because they know what they're doing.
That's right.
They know how to do it. They got trained.
That's right. I've got 3 grandkids in college now, so it's just a perfect time on the educational discussions. And I really so enjoy hearing them, talk about their experiences and ask about their experiences and different things. And, you just, I think in the equipment dealership today, Ron, I think we have to turn those into universities. And I think our dealerships need to become so pronounced that, we're seeking out educational opportunities. We want all of our people to have an MBA in parts management, an MBA in sales management. We want to have that because we've got to have the best, to have not just the longevity, but to get peak performance, out of the operation, and certainly to keep these customers that are changing fast and the expectations are changing fast. And we've got to have our front line able to do that. And I don't think you can, you just can't fake that. I mean, you can't get a college degree by attending a 1 or 2 day class. There's multiple classes, there's multiple disciplines, there's pre-testing, there's post-testing. I mean, that's how you get an education, and I think that's so, and I think we're starting to see that become recognized, and I'm starting to see that. It's not as widespread, maybe. Part of that, I think, was the opportunities that were available. When the manufacturer offers training, they're not combining operational training, soft skill training into one thing. It's usually technical related. So I think what you're offering, and certainly even in the niche what I'm offering, is really unique today to provide an accelerant, the ability for those operations to speed up.
Let's broach another subject. I think there's a generational issue here too. The baby boomers basically lead the parade for most industries in America, most of the free world. But they're really risk averse. They don't have a lot of recovery time. They want to stick with the status quo versus Gen Z, Gen X, and the millennials. Get out of my damn way. Come on, we got to change this. We got to fix this. Let's go. And that gap, I think that's part of the great resignation. These younger people say, you're not moving, to heck with you. I'm going somewhere else where they're interested. And once that gap goes, I think then education will be much more prominent, because the Gen Z, X, for sure, those 2 generations, They know the world is changing so darn fast. They got to keep learning. It's a lifelong pursuit now.
Well, I think it's a natural occurrence for them to learn.
I
They have
agree.
to, every time a new app comes out, they've got to learn it. Every time a new platform, they've got to learn it.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other
And
interesting thing about that psychologically, this is kind of a personal one, but Apple and Samsung phones. I've got, I don't know, 8 phones in the family and the companies and all the rest of the stuff. And there's 3 Samsungs. I control all of them. The others are all Apple. Why? Well, I know how to use this thing. I don't want to blah, blah, blah. I know this app, blah, blah, blah. My granddaughter, 20 years old now, she had an Apple 4. She didn't want to go through the upgrades. No, it's too much work. I'm comfortable with this. I don't want. She's a teenager. Where the heck did that come from? This is a kid that was a salutatorian. It's not that she's ignorant. It's not that she's dumb. She's smart like hell. She works like it. No, but that's a change. That's the other dangling participle. You're dealing with helping people get better. I'm dealing with helping people get better. There's people out there that don't think they need to get better.
Right.
That audience is shrinking.
Yep.
That's good for you and I, but it's also good for people in general, because change is happening in the world around us at a much greater rate than we're able to keep up with. And we start to recognize that, and we stick our hands up and say, you're going to have to help me. I don't know how to do that anymore. And I'm 50. And there's not many 50-year-olds today out of the baby boomer generation that would want to do that. Can't explain that I don't know that stuff. Young guys, they don't care.
I've got a CPA, had for years. Why? Like he said, Floyd, you're pretty sharp on that stuff. I said, yeah, but you're sharper. You do this every day. You and your team really work at it. I've got an investment group, and that's what they do. I don't do that every day. It doesn't mean that I can't, but they're experts in their field, and allows that knowledge base to be so much faster and more precise. And I think that's a lot about what you've done inside the on-demand learning, Ron, is that you've created content that allows that accelerant. People can really speed up the learning curves, and that's part of what I'm doing, is taking all my background experience. I don't have employees today. I don't have anything other than I'm servicing a client or I'm out playing on the beach. That's one or the other. And in that service to the client, I'm able to give that real pointed one-to-one relationship that I always strive to do before, but it's hard to do when you're growing a company and you got, 25 mouths to feed, and, everybody's pulling at you, and that's just part of it. So, I think that's a very unique thing today. And there's a lot of coaches out there, but, I don't know, I'm not taking the how to be a coach class. I just haven't done that, Ron. I'm probably not going to. I've done this for a long time, and like your work, you're coming from practical experience, and I think that's where I think we have such an edge, is because we have that practical experience. And you just can't get a college degree in a day or two class. I don't think you can get what I know by reading a book. You got to read a lot of books. You got to do a lot of work to get. And sometimes I don't remember what I know until the opportunity arises, and there I am. If I have experience in that, I'm able to draw on it. If I don't have, then I can't. That's just all there is to it.
It's the famous Donald Rumsfeld quote. I know what I know. I know what I don't know. I don't know what I don't know. And everybody criticized him for that, but that's a very profound statement, that you don't know what you don't know until you're confronted with the need to know it. And then I don't know how to do that, or I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah.
Learning and training is a critical element in society today. And we're being poorly served by traditional models. The university education, the preschool education, the grade school, high school, all of it is predicated on things from the 20s and 30s and 40s. And this isn't a social exercise. This is a STEM exercise, science and math and reading and good stuff. With all respect, I'm not interested in women's studies as far as a job preparing pursuit. You want to do that, that's wonderful. But as a commercial enterprise, as a business, I want the schools to give me job-ready people.
Right.
And today, universities have to spend the first year doing remedial training in writing, critical thinking, arithmetic. Imagine.
Right.
So they come into the workforce and, here we go. What do you know? Okay. I think we beat up training pretty well in the last 45 minutes or so. Have you got a bow you'd like to put on this thing to wrap it all up? We can go for hours, Floyd, as you well know.
Ron, I think we covered, quite a bit here. I think for me, it's back to, does this information help somebody that listens to it? Does it help them to understand how to look at their situation a little better? Does it make them learn how to ask better questions? Is there something about that? We could certainly drill down into how the tests are designed and why they're designed a certain way and how curriculum is built. But your customers and mine, they're not curriculum builders. That's not what they do to generate revenue. They depend upon us, other people for that. So hopefully something we've said today allows them to gain some insight to maybe think a little bit differently about their situation. I would just encourage the owners that listen to this and maybe management and certainly HR is to, broaden that thinking about how to provide education to your people. And, look at your people holistically, not just through the one department or one division, is because the ability to grow your people, is there's opportunities today. And I know there's cost of labor when they're gone or they're taking time away from doing that. But, what you want is not just a happy employee, but you want a highly competent one. And the more competencies you can help that individual bring, I think the happier they are on the job, because they're, the great resignation, we talked about this last time around on the hiring thing, this whole deal about, how do we retain people? I think we have to have them involved, not something we do to them, but something they do with us. And when they know you're spending money on education, it's okay to show them how much you're spending, not just in the cost of the education, but the cost of the time away from the job. I think that there's nothing wrong with that.
And let me just interrupt there for a second. I was working with a dealer a couple of weeks ago who's a large dealership, and they spend about $1.5 million a year training technicians. I said, terrific. What's the other training budget you have? We don't have any other training budget.
Yeah.
Your technicians are the only people that you need to train? He said, that's an interesting way of asking a question, isn't it? I said, not really. They don't think about it. It's tools in a toolbox. It drives me crazy.
Ron, do they have a lot of interdepartmental friction?
Of course. And that's part of it's a byproduct of this, isn't it? It's all related, Floyd. My best man and I, he was the general service manager, or the service manager in Montreal when I was the parts manager in Montreal. We were annoyed at the relationship that the departments had, so we decided we'd swap jobs. We asked permission, and we stayed that way for about a year. Didn't do a thing. So we swapped back, and I said, okay, here's the reason that this is a problem. We got a different gene pool in the service department, and that one's too shallow. They didn't think I was very funny. The whole thing about training, Floyd, we can go forever, and I agree with you. I want to get on the balance sheet the skill sets of the employees. I want to get employees to be provided a certain amount of education every year, commensurate with the need to learn. So the younger people and newer employees are going to have more dense education than not. I want at least a month of specifically assigned employee development. Now, that doesn't mean necessarily time away from the job, because our internet-based programs, you can do that at home.
Right.
A lot of the caring, that's just an indicator to me. Yeah, I'll do that on the weekend. How long does that take? It's about an hour. Okay, I'll get it done on Sunday afternoon when I'm watching a football game. That tells me something. So we have a huge need for, and will constantly have a huge need for, skilled employees, happy employees, to enhance the customer experience. And I think discussions like this hopefully will provoke some thinking and hopefully give some people some ideas. And if that's true, then we've succeeded.
Yes, sir. I agree.
Thank you, Floyd, as usual, and thank all of you who've been listening for this candid conversation. I look forward to being with you at another one in the near future. Mahalo.